Good afternoon, everyone. Good morning to those of you that might be joining us from the West Coast. My name is Alexander Polizos. I'm the Channel Program Manager here at Edisoft. Very excited to be part of BAASS Connect. You know, we've been a part of it for many years, and we miss the physical interaction. But I'm thrilled that Joe Arnone and the team at BAASS have managed to find a way for allowing us to do this even virtually. It's very important we stay connected and be able to drive great content to the Sage 300 ecosystem and have you guys think about how you can maximize your use of Sage 300. So again, my name is Alexander Polizos from Edisoft. Today we'll be talking about supply chain solutions, specifically Edisoft's innovative B2B and B2B solutions, which are revolutionizing and actually changing how you think about connecting your ecosystem of supply chain applications to Sage 300. Just a couple housekeeping items. We will save some time for the end of the session. We are actually doing 2 sessions worth, so this will be 2 25-minute sessions, ending around 2:30 or so. What I want to identify is I will be monitoring the chat box. Please, if you have any questions that come up as I go through my presentation today, please feel free to ask them. I'd love to answer questions even during the presentation, and we will have some designated time for the end of the session for Q&A as well. So with that, let's begin. So as part of today's agenda, we're really looking at supply chain solutions, really in the realm of how you optimize processing orders, shipments, and invoices for the holistic scope of your B2B business to business and B2C business to consumer channels. Now that could come in the form of distribution center orders, direct to store orders, cross-dock orders, could be drop shipment in the world of e-commerce marketplaces, but that being B2C. And we're going to talk about what does that look like as part of an end-to-end process, and what do you want to be thinking about when you're actually looking at that challenge. So what is that challenge primarily? That's where we're going to start. We'll go into what the solution is from Edisoft to actually meet and solve that challenge. We'll go into some use case scenarios so you can actually understand how our solutions and products apply to optimizing order, shipment, and invoicing around Sage 300. Talk a little bit about what makes us different at Edisoft. Go into a success story, a joint customer between Edisoft and BAASS, and then we'll obviously open up the floor for some Q&A. Okay. So what is the #1 challenge for Sage 300 distributors and manufacturers? I'll go ahead and turn my webcam off so I don't distract anyone further from the content on the screen. So that #1 challenge for distributors and manufacturers, it's about a disconnected supply chain ecosystem. And specifically, what applications need to be combined? On the left-hand side of this screen, what you're seeing is your Sage 300 instance. Primarily from Edisoft's perspective, the modules that are of key significance here pertain to the master data for your business, the core data that you set up that defines your business related to your accounts receivable customer records, your accounts payable vendor records, your purchase order module, your order entry module, where you actually manage the process for orders, shipments, and invoices. And of course, inventory control. You distribute and manufacture or manufacture products. Those SKUs that represent the items you sell, well, you hold that master data and inventory control. Now, on the right-hand side of the screen, we have a view of multiple product categories for order management and fulfillment third-party independent software vendors, Edisoft being one of them. These are all there to look at a way of accessing new markets for the purpose primarily of streamlining orders, shipments, and invoices. Right, you can be connecting to your B2B or B2C markets using EDI, using an e-commerce marketplace. Obviously, depending on the regions and the types of products you sell, where you sell them and how you sell them, there's different tax implications. As a manufacturer, you might be looking at a material resource planning application. As a distributor and a manufacturer, you might be looking at how you're actually managing the fulfillment of those goods, whether they be in your own warehouses using a warehouse management system, that's the WMS circle. It could be looking at a hybrid or a totally third-party logistics service for your fulfillment. You might have third-party logistics services that actually hold your inventory. How do you properly manage the receipt of inventory to those third-party logistics providers? Understanding how you get that information back into your Sage 300 ERP system. And then equally, how do you deal with carriers? And that's where carrier management systems, CMS or TMS, transportation management systems, come into play. Different rules for how you deal with drop shipments, i.e. B2C, delivering goods to residential addresses versus distribution centers versus direct to store. There are different service levels that come with that. Well, really the key here is understanding the relationship to Sage 300. Now, this ecosystem on the right-hand side really represents the typical areas that distributors and manufacturers need to consider. And again, being focused on optimizing the processing of orders, shipments, and invoices. So really that number one issue is, how do we effectively and efficiently combine or connect these siloed applications? And moreover, there's some technology considerations here. Are these local in our own client, in our own server environment? Are they on-premise? Are these applications in the cloud? So really, wherever they reside, how do we effectively and efficiently combine and connect these? Okay. Now, what are some of the current challenges when we look at the Sage 300 ecosystem and connecting and combining these? Right? There's technology. I talked about cloud versus on-premise. There's the integration strategy. There's the scope of each of those orange circles that represent different product categories that I just spoke to. Now, that predominant approach of trying to look at integration and connecting through ETL tools or software customization or field-to-field level mapping, trying to get that data into Sage or out of Sage, can add layers of complexity that are strictly in the realm of technology. And when we start to try and navigate our optimization of orders, shipments, and invoices, those end-to-end processes, and we introduce these technology considerations, sometimes that can lead to a burden for you, the customer, your ERP partner in BAASS, and the ERP application itself that are strictly based, again, on technical considerations, and it could lead to misaligned business outcomes. Then if you take those technology issues and you pair it with the consideration that in each of those product categories, you have ecosystem ISVs for Sage 300 that are very strong in being able to deliver MRP solutions, carrier management solutions, EDI solutions. We need to understand the scope, because if you look at the end-to-end process of orders, shipments, and invoices, you have multiple ISVs potentially that are helping with slivers of that. And if you don't see beyond that scope, and the application you bring in doesn't help you see beyond that, it leads to additional challenges, again, in effectively and efficiently combining these applications. So we want to remove the technical considerations. We want to remove the scope parameters. We want to look at your end-to-end process, understand the relationship to Sage, and really understand how do we create a single standardized process here to not only simplify our own operations, but simplify how we bring everything together at a technology level as well. So what are some of the symptoms when you have some of these challenges in terms of effectively and efficiently combining? Well, these are some of the top 12 that Edisoft has seen over its 25-year history. You know, you have data silos, poor customer service issues. Maybe your sales or customer service team cannot find data related to shipment tracking numbers or other things that they need in real time to be able to work with their customers and their partners. Potentially data entry errors if you don't have integration. Increased manual steps, inefficient collaboration. These are some of those top symptoms that we see. And of course, again, just being a sample, this is what you may be experiencing today, and asking yourself, what's really the root cause here? And from Edisoft's quarter century of experience in helping customers with these types of solutions in supply chain, we found that how you actually combine these applications tends to be that number one challenge, and solving that is actually solving the root cause for these symptoms and many more. So now that we understand the challenge, the question is, how should applications be connected? Now on the screen right now, we have sort of a three-tiered view. there are business processes that I'm sure many of you listening can relate to, right? These are processes that you are likely familiar with within your own business. Receiving inventory and putting it away in your warehouse or in conjunction with a third-party provider. Receiving orders and posting those as customer account records and orders within Sage 300. Managing your inventory, managing your bin locations within Sage 300 and physically within your warehouse or with your 3PL. Picking and packing, both virtually and physically. Label management, packing slip management, right? Different order types, different order channels, B2B and B2C, have different labels and different packing slip requirements, things that need to go on the outside of your containers, whether those are cartons or pallets. Things that need to go on the inside of boxes when you're doing drop shipments. Carrier scheduling, being able to actually contact all the carriers you work with in an effective way. Could be one, could be two, could be many more than that. How do we do that in an effective and standardized way? Then when you've actually called the carriers, you've shipped out your products, well, you need to come back and close your accounting procedures. You need to close your receivables if we're talking about order fulfillment. So how do we create those shipment records? How do we create those invoices? And then, of course, being able to report operationally on all these processes from an end-to-end perspective. You might want to be looking at a particular process. You might want to look at the KPIs for the entire process end-to-end. You might want to be looking at a particular user. Okay, so those are sort of the business processes, just a sample of them, that we need to think about when we say, hey, well, what are we trying to do when we combine these applications? But then you have transactions. You actually have physical documents that support these processes. You have purchase orders, you have sales orders, you have pick orders, shipments, invoices, PO receipts, IC receipts, inventory advice or inventory level documents, 3PL requests and confirmations if you're using a 3PL. And that's, again, just a sample of some of the transactions that Sage 300 supports. But we need to be able to view those as well as part of these business processes. Then the question is, now that we know what business processes we're trying to affect, the transactions that are part of those processes, well, which applications are supporting each of these? And that's part of that scope question that we raised earlier. What is actually affecting these? What applications are supporting this? Now, Sage 300 is your ERP. It's the core to your system. And that's why it's in the middle there on the right. Within each of those modules, Sage 300 has actually identified for you what that process looks like. If you think about your order entry module, it says your orders need to have this information. They get transformed into a shipment entry. They get transformed into an invoice entry. That's a view to your process. So when we connect to e-commerce marketplaces, when we connect to EDI partners, how do we make sure we follow those governance rules that Sage 300 is so effectively and clearly laid out in its modules and as a product as a whole? So again, really the takeaway here is for any connected ecosystem to be successful, and more importantly, to be standardized, it really warrants an end-to-end understanding of the relationships between process, transaction, and application. And when you do that, when you achieve that understanding, again, starting with Sage 300, starting with the governance rules, whether they be financial compliance requirements, looking at tax codes, carrier codes, etc., or looking at the governance of the process, order to shipment to invoice, we can actually create an instance of Sage 300 that is truly the conductor or the single source of truth for orchestrating all our business processes and transactions. So now that we've covered sort of what is that number one challenge, we want to ask ourselves, well, how do we solve this? Now, this is how we want to look at the applications. And this is where I'm pleased to say the Edisoft solution is here to help you. So what is that solution? Well, this is what Edisoft does. Unlike our name suggests from our 25-year history, where we started in the realm of EDI in 1995, we quickly expanded into what we now call the cloud-connected supply chain. It's really about revolutionizing B2B and B2B supply chain processes by taking a different approach, an approach that actually matches the last slide we just looked at. which is how do we effectively combine that? Now, for Edisoft, we use what we call meshing. It's built into our design, it's built into our technology. What that means is when we look at a process, and we can look at it as connecting to a Shopify web store or connecting to an EDI trading partner, what do we really want to do there, right? We want to download that order and we want to post it to Sage 300. We want to get it in the appropriate ledger for that AR customer account and create an order record in Sage 300. So that business process needs to be meshed based on the Sage 300 governance rules within the application itself and those modules. It needs to be meshed with Sage 300 API. We just don't want to dump data into optional fields. And there's also gap rules. There's clear rules and things that data needs to come in, but Sage needs to kick in and also provide a lot of that data as well, which it does. So once we've meshed that, well, we're also looking at orchestrating the process and mediating data. It's not a process of taking all of that data from your e-commerce order or your EDI order and putting it into Sage and then asking Sage to figure out what to do with that. It's actually giving Sage just what it needs. That leads to a leaner ecosystem, one that you can more efficiently combine and connect, okay? And then you can actually orchestrate a process in a way that's governed by what Sage 300 needs. And then you've actually defined a standard process, regardless of the order type and regardless of the shipment type. And we'll get into that more later. Now, once you've done that, you're actually also eliminating complexity of existing integration strategies in the Sage 300 ecosystem. Again, this is all about optimizing order management and order fulfillment processes. So you might be asking yourself, hey, Alexander, what do you mean by meshing? What do you mean by orchestrating? Well, we're going to get into some use case scenarios very soon, and you're going to see what we mean by that. Now, one other thing I'd like to identify here is there's two orange icons next to EDI and WMS. Those represent two of Edisoft's core products, but you'll see how they actually wrap around Sage as the cloud icon around the Sage icon identify. So we're actually wrapping, those products represent a wrap around Sage 300 to ensure that whatever applications you connect are coming through a standardized process or being connected into a standardized process. And again, we do that by meshing business processes. So built into our products is making sure that when you post a sales order, it's agnostic to whether that's EDI or e-commerce, but it also knows that it's EDI or e-commerce. It also knows the rules for that, and it meshes that with the rules that Sage needs. Sage doesn't care if it's EDI. It doesn't care if you manually enter an order that you received through fax or through email. It doesn't care if it came from an e-commerce marketplace or an e-commerce application or web store. It cares that you've actually complied with what it needs for an order to be generated. You have the account number for that customer. You have any carrier codes. You have a ship via code. You have ship to location. Those are things that matter. And that's what we mean by Sage 300 governance rules. However, we can't ignore that an e-commerce marketplace or an EDI order has its own rules that you need to be accounting for to be compliant. Now, we don't need to look at each of those channels, B2B or B2C, as a separate process. And that's what Edisoft's done here. Over our 25-year history, we've recognized that, hey, you can actually standardize this process if you account for these rules, starting with Sage 300, because Sage 300 is, again, the core to your system in the order entry to shipment entry to invoice entry process, amongst other processes built into Sage 300. It's giving you a standard. However, when people begin to grow, distributors and manufacturers begin to grow, and they enter new B2B and new B2C markets, potentially with new products that they sell or the same products, those compliance rules of those B2B and B2C channels tend to have people, what we've seen consistently, with very disparate integration strategies that effectively create unique processes for each of these channels. And what does that mean when you have a unique process? Well, you have a unique team within your organization that you're relying on to actually be able to understand that process start to finish, Well, what do I need for a cross-dock order? Oh, I need this type of labeling. What do I need for a drop shipment? Oh, I need this type of packing slip. You know, Jane understands the packing slip requirements. She manages those labels, and Joe understands the cross-dock order. What we're here to tell you is we do away with all that complexity at Edisoft. We will actually allow you, with our revolutionary B2B and B2C platform, connect to those channels and manage an orchestrated and standardized order management and order fulfillment process. So your entire team can be contributing to a single process. You can actually gain visibility that you didn't have previously. You can gain productivity that you didn't have previously. And of course, profitability. And what we mean by profitability is when you're actually integrating and connecting your system in this way, you're allowing yourself to actually reduce ongoing maintenance and ongoing upgrade and ongoing support complexity. It becomes less of a question about the technology and more a question about your business process and how you want that to work for your business. Okay. So, how does this work? How does it work for the cloud connected supply chain? Well, for Edisoft, we start with one thing. Let's talk about the B2B and B2C processes. Again, relating to your order shipments and invoices. What do we want to look at? Now, we've talked about order management, talked about order fulfillment. There's a whole bunch of sub processes that go into each of these. You could be looking at better acknowledging orders, managing change requests, providing inventory advice, working with your 3PLs. On the order fulfillment side, you might be saying, hey, I just want to get barcode scanners in my warehouse and actually better manage purchase order receiving and put away so that in real time, I'm seeing in Sage 300 a purchase order receipt get generated with the quantity that was received, and that's confirmed based on the physical activity taking place in the warehouse. There's an IC receipt, my inventory goes up. When I'm fulfilling, my inventory goes down in Sage in real time. So this is where we start. We want to understand from you, what are those processes that you're looking at standardizing or that you're having challenges with today, or even more simply, that you want to integrate to Sage 300. Step two, naturally for Edisoft, is we got to relate that to your Sage 300 modules and configuration. And this is where our partnership with BAASS really drives a value-added strategy and vision for your company. It's one thing to say, yeah, we can connect you to EDI, we can put barcode scanners in your warehouse, we can connect you to carriers using other members of the Sage 300 ecosystem. However, you can only do that the way that Edisoft does it in terms of removing and eliminating that number one challenge if you actually understand the relationship to Sage 300. So this is where we work very closely with the BAASS team and we say, well, if this is a drop shipment, if this is a B2C account that you're actually fulfilling orders for, well, we don't want to create a customer account record for every end user or residential address that orders, because those are going to change and increase, and you can have up to 1 million AR accounts. We want a single account. So we actually look and understand the relationship to Sage 300. And when we work with BAASS and they help us actually make sure that we're configuring based on these needs, our products simply click in. There is no ETL tools, there's no software customization, there's no field level data mapping. We're not integrating the same way. And that's how we actually, based on Sage 300, integrate in a standardized way to support a standardized process. So once we've related these processes to the modules and the configuration of those modules within Sage 300, well, then you choose your Edisoft products. And we have two core products, Merchant Cloud and QuickPack. Both come in different versions, 2 versions each based on the type of functionality that you need, whether it be related to automation in the order management side, or whether it be related to a slew of warehouse functionality on the QuickPack side. So Merchant Cloud is a SaaS multi-tenanted browser-based order management application allowing you to connect to EDI and e-commerce B2B and B2C channels. It also can connect to other applications in your environment, like a warehouse system or a carrier management system, so we can organize, combine, and orchestrate business processes and transactions. QuickPack is a multi-warehouse automation and fulfillment system designed to actually, whether you use barcode scanning devices that are mobile in your warehouse or you have a workstation with a tethered scanner tied to it, QuickPack is actually used to help you with your warehouse processes, whether that's related to order fulfillment, the picking, packing, and shipping of goods, whether it's related to inbound receiving and put away, or simply the internal management of inventory. And both of these products are truly an extension of Sage 300. So we're not replicating and creating data silos of inventory. We're actually leveraging a true connection through Sage 300's API to each of these modules. So again, these processes, order fulfillment and order management, they relate starkly to each of our two core products. And these are both modular and configurable. You don't need both of them. You can start with one, add the other at a later time. Then we want to say, well, once we've determined the processes, we've determined the core product from Edisoft that we need, well, what do we want to connect to, right? QuickPack can be used on its own, connected to Sage 300 for your warehouse, but you want to complete that end-to-end process. How do we connect to carriers? Well, there's products in the Sage 300 ecosystem for connecting to carrier management, connecting to carriers. A great one is Process Weaver, and there's others. So, or potentially on QuickPack, you might need to relate it to your MRP processes. How are you actually turning raw materials into work in progress, into finished goods? Well, when those finished goods come off of your manufacturing line, how do we make sure that they not only get into Sage, but QuickPack is aware of them for any orders that might be waiting for that inventory to be fulfilled? And then on Merchant Cloud, we can connect Merchant Cloud to EDI trading partners. We can connect it to e-commerce marketplaces like Shopify. We can also connect it to carrier management systems and warehouse management systems for the purpose of organizing shipment notifications, invoice records that have tracking numbers and the appropriate costs associated with them. And that's why with both of these products, and together they form truly an orchestrated end-to-end vision for Sage 300 distributors and manufacturers. It's about looking at the scope beyond just an EDI or an e-commerce marketplace. It's understanding what are those business processes and what are those transactions that affect my B2B and B2C channels end to end. Okay. And really, to the extent that you want to have a fully automated, a partially automated, you can determine that by using Merchant Cloud and or QuickPack and determining how many connectors you want to add onto that. And again, all of these, both of our core products and all the connectors we support are all configurable menu driven. Again, no ETL, no coding or software customization, no field-to-field level data mapping. That's actually how we simplify the complexity around combining all of the applications around Sage 300. Okay. You might have accessories. Edisoft can support your accessory needs. If you have GS1 or UCC 128 labels, you might have drop vendor shipment packing slips. And what does this end up with? Well, you can rapidly get up and running with scalable end-to-end solutions. So again, Merchant Cloud and QuickPack are there to enforce Sage 300 governance rules and mesh those with your B2B and B2C channel compliance requirements. Those could be EDI compliance needs, e-commerce compliance needs, carrier compliance needs, okay? And that's really what the Edisoft experience and value proposition is about. It's not about looking at a product category and saying I need EDI. We can help you there. It's about saying, how do I make sure I'm connecting to EDI trading partners in a way that matches my current order management and order fulfillment processes? And we'll help keep things standardized and simplified for you. And again, the benefits of that is not just the productivity gains and the orchestrations of your processes across all applications connected to Sage 300. It actually simplifies your IT environment. Manage your Sage upgrades significantly faster with less cost. Rely less on particular specialized skill sets to go through what are business level decisions. And that's what we've striven to create and design and provide to the Sage 300 market for 25 years. So let's go into some quick use case scenarios. Again, if there's any questions, please feel free to add them to the chat box and I'd be happy to answer them. Here's an e-commerce order management fulfillment workflow. So you can actually see how Merchant Cloud and QuickPack are helping to manage the process. And we start from number 1 and go all the way around to number 9. And QuickPack and Merchant Cloud are actually orchestrating these business processes and these transactions across the applications they connect to. So you might have a Shopify web store, an order comes into Merchant Cloud. We're going to validate that order based on the items on it and their price against Sage 300, and then we're going to post it. Manage exception handling if there's any discrepancies there. Once that order is in Sage 300, it's not on hold. You've gone through your normal validation and credit checks. You've allocated inventory. QuickPack downloads that as an available pick order. You'll be able to waive that to a team in the warehouse to actually assign them to pick that order or batches of orders, right? You can pack and send that shipment with, as you're using scanners to pick and pack it, QuickPack is bringing in order details consistently from Sage 300 related to the customer account record. If there's any carrier codes or ship via codes that need to be accounted for, and we're combining that with the sales order data without the pricing so people can pick and pack. And then we're adding to that and meshing the actual dimensions using barcode scanners. So using your carton and pallet setups in inventory control in Sage, using your item estimated weights again in Sage, we're not bringing in a separate inventory file, we're using what's already in Sage. We're gonna let you scan and pack that. We're gonna generate a virtual representation of that shipment. We're gonna combine all of that in a way that allows you to automate the movement to your carriers. And we can connect to carrier management systems. Again, I mentioned one that's prevalent in the Sage 300 ecosystem known as Process Weaver. So what does that mean? That means QuickPack is actually meshed together Sage 300 governance rules, saying, hey, if I'm going to call a carrier, I need to know the customer details from the customer account record. I also need to know details from the order entry record. And then I'm going to combine that with what I'm capturing on the QuickPack scanning solution. And I'm going to package all of that together and I'm going to send it to a carrier. So no data needs to be re-entered. The carrier wants to know, where's this going? Are there any third-party billing accounts for freight that need to be accounted for? What is the size and weight of this shipment? QuickPacks combine that all. And we do that consistently, whether it's an EDI, e-commerce, or other order. And what you'll notice is we're actually combining and aggregating this data as we go so we can consistently, in a standard way, have a single pick and pack process, whether it's a B2B or B2C order. QuickPack will also recognize, based on that customer account in Sage, hey, this is a distribution center order. We need carton labels or pallet labels. Hey, this is a drop shipment order. We need packing slips based on the items that we're picking and packing. So it'll even orchestrate that label management process. Now, once we've sent the details to the carrier system can print off those carrier labels for FedEx, UPS, Purolator, whoever you use. QuickPack's going to pull back in that shipment tracking number, that freight cost, and any other relevant details you need. And why do we do that? Well, Sage wants that. Sage wants that to have a compliant financial record of that shipment and that invoice, to be able to properly invoice consistently every time. And that's part of that standard workflow. QuickPack will then create an ERP shipment record, a Sage 300 shipment and invoice record. But when we're done that, QuickPack's saying, hey, Merchant Cloud saying, hey, this was a Shopify order. We need to be able to update our inventory. So we're not only creating a shipment record and invoice record. Once we do that, Sage 300 is drawing down on inventory, real-time view of your inventory. Merchant Cloud's picking that up. And we're able to send shipment confirmations to Shopify with tracking numbers that have been brought in from the carriers to QuickPack to Sage to Merchant Cloud. We can update inventory levels in your e-commerce marketplace, even send invoice records. So that's part of that standard e-commerce order management and fulfillment workflow. Now, again, if you don't have a WMS or you use a 3PL, Merchant Cloud can connect to those to manage steps 3 to 7. You don't have to have your own warehouse to get this level of process orchestration. There's ways to connect to 3PLs, primarily using EDI, in a way that they can actually, you can continue to establish this standard process. Now, what you'll notice is this is almost identical when we go from e-commerce to EDI order management and fulfillment. Again, potentially a B2C, potentially a B2B channel, depending on how you use your e-commerce marketplaces and the types of EDI trading partners you might connect to. The only difference here is step 9. We're actually using that data from QuickPack, the virtual packing structure, the details from the carrier in terms of the tracking numbers. We're assigning labels, right? We're printing labels that have barcodes on them, and we're combining and meshing all of that information, knowing it's an EDI order, to give it to Merchant Cloud, who can automatically send compliant advanced shipment notices, inventory advice documents, and invoices. And these numbers beside each of these, under step 9, those represent the EDI documents. Okay. This is the two of them combined, and this has been a solution we consistently provide to Sage 300 distributors and manufacturers. Their businesses are growing, they're expanding. They want to be able to do business at volume with Walmart, with Loblaws, with whoever you serve, depending on your industry. And a lot of those big box retailers, well, they want, Hudson's Bay, they want EDI if you're going to be doing business with them at volume. But then you might also be trying to, in the digital age and the virtual age that we're all going through in 2020, you want to be able to open up your own digital presence online. You might be looking at Shopify. How do we avoid any integration or technical complexities and maintain that standard process? Well, that's what Merchant Cloud and QuickPack do. With a single point of connection to Sage, we can connect outwards to e-commerce and EDI. QuickPack can connect us to the carrier, so we don't need to worry about integrations from a carrier system directly into Sage 300. If you do that, if you integrate a carrier system directly to Sage 300, you might be bypassing some of the picking and packing data. Then you don't have, as you go through your order, shipment, and invoice process, you don't have a consistent aggregated collection of data as it goes through the process. For some channels, you might be connecting Shopify directly to a carrier system. Well, you've bypassed. Now that Shopify order has no relationship in your operational reporting to Sage 300 order. You have to print off multiple spreadsheets and combine them. Well, Merchant Cloud and QuickPack follow this process based on the governance rules in Sage 300, and they make that a key distinguishing factor. Okay. So what does this look like when we talk about menu of ecosystem options? These are some of the applications we've connected to with Edisoft's Cloud Connected Supply Chain, right? So Merchant Cloud serving as a connector for EDI trading partners. We can connect to e-commerce marketplaces. We can connect to MRPs, WMS systems, even where people don't use QuickPack for their warehouse. We've been able to connect to HighJump and other WMS systems for the purposes of orchestrating B2B and B2C transactions. We need to know how that was picked and packed in the world of EDI. We need to know that tracking number and freight information in the world of e-commerce and EDI. How do you automate that? Well, you need to connect and combine all these applications. How do you do that efficiently without cost overruns and project delays? Well, you have to understand the relationship between the process, the transaction, and the application. All of them configurable and built in to the Edisoft products. Okay. And again, this is not the holistic scope of everything we've helped customers connect to. By meshing these business processes, we actually create standard specifications that allow our customers to connect to any of applications in any of these categories that they want. We actually show them, here are the data fields, here's the actual spec that you need to connect. If you get this data from this application, or you can send this data to that application, it remains part of your standardized process. Okay. So when we talk about the differentiated value, it really boils down into 4 key points. 360-degree compliance. Our products have processes built into them that account for GAAP governance rules and financial governance rules in ERP. Compliance from an EDI and carrier perspective, and any industry-specific business rules across all supply chain applications. So that could be if you deal with any hazardous goods that have particular data that needs to go in, we can obviously configure our application to account for that. Again, as part of the inventory item setup and inventory control within Sage. True visibility. We can show you a holistic aggregated view of every order, shipment, and invoice that's collecting data as it goes along its journey, inclusive of purchase orders and inventory receipts and cycle counts. And you can actually enable all of your departments to have access to just the data they need when they need it. We talked about customer service teams being able to see tracking numbers for shipments. This leads to unparalleled productivity. You don't have different people in the same department managing different processes for different B2B and B2C order channels. Okay, it's a true standard operating procedure. And again, it's based on the governance rules already in your Sage 300 application. We help you unlock those. Future-proof profitability by combining and connecting the applications the way Edisoft does, without the use of ETL tools, without the use of software coding, without the use of field-to-field level data mapping. We maximize your ROI on your investment in the software as order, shipment, and invoice transactions scale, because we actually simplify what tends to be a hidden cost. What most customers don't realize is the time it takes you to upgrade Sage 300 because you are integrated to so many different applications in so many different ways can lead to months to go through an upgrade process, could lead to additional cost, third-party IT resources needing to come in and evaluate everything, specialized skill sets, and just needing to help you maintain or upgrade your existing systems. We remove that complexity, and that is part of the cost to your business. If you look at the life cycle of your applications, it's not just profitability because you can see more data or you can do things more productively. You actually have less cost in maintaining it, just as you would in terms of taking, as an analogy, your car into your dealership. Same concept here. There's maintenance and support considerations for your software systems as well. A couple key features here, SaaS multi-tenant, you're always on the latest version for Edisoft products. Zero software coding, we talked about that out of the box configurable feature set, and we're the only vendor to establish a common set of rules for all your order, shipments, and invoices, and that's based on what we've talked about when we talk about meshing. So here's a customer success story. It's a joint customer between BAASS and Edisoft. Customer's name is Throat Threads. They built their business around mainly EDI, B2B channels. They had an Excelos, or now known as HighJump, warehouse management system, very robust system, perfect for their needs. And we actually helped them combine and connect Sage 300 to Excelos to orchestrate their EDI processes based on the standards they already had set up in Sage 300. So here's some of the ROIs that they saw: 98% average vendor scorecard ranking. Who they sold to, Hudson's Bay Company and others, they wanted to do more business with them because they were always receiving order acknowledgements, shipment notifications, and invoices on time and accurate based on EDI compliance needs. But part of that EDI compliance is having carrier codes, is having consistent packing information. So we actually connected to the Excelos warehouse to pull that information in a standardized way, regardless of the EDI trading partner. Each EDI trading partner has a different format for how they want things. If you can find a consistent way to populate that data without having different processes and different integrations, you've solved it. And that's what we did here for Throat Threads. So this is one of the fastest top 25, or I think 50 growing companies in Canada over the past few years. Very proud to have done this with BAASS. This was not an easy project. We had to understand their business processes. So we started with step one: what are you trying to solve? Okay. Now that takes us to the end of our presentation. I think we have a couple minutes to spare for Q&A. I'd love to be able to answer any questions anyone has at this time. And thank you so much for sticking with me for the duration of the 50-minute session. I'd love to take any questions at this time.
I do have some questions here already, and just a reminder to use the question pane if you would like to submit one. First one I have is, can you help me understand how and when meshing is applicable to me?
Yeah, that's a great question, Remington. And obviously the concept of mesh is something that Edisoft has introduced. Mesh is really about combining all the rules, governance rules, that you need to better connect to your B2B, or to connect in a standardized way all your applications for your B2B and B2C channels. So there are compliance rules for how you go through order, shipments, and invoices in Sage 300. Right, so updating information or pulling information from any of those key modules in Sage, you need to account for those. But then there's also compliance rules for how you send information to your carriers, how you send information to e-commerce marketplaces, and how you send information and receive information in EDI as well. So that's really what meshing is. It's accounting for all these rules that exist in this industry and these B2B and B2C channels, and meshing them together in a way that removes the chaos that can be perceived based on technical complications.
The next question I have here is also about meshing. what services or applications can Edisoft connect or mesh together?
Yeah, that's another great question in terms of the product applicability. What I'll do is on my screen here, these are really the primary areas we bring together. So Merchant Cloud and QuickPack wrap around the ERP, and you can connect through them. Merchant Cloud is about connecting to those B2B and B2C channels. So connecting to EDI trading partners, connecting to e-commerce marketplaces. QuickPack is about connecting your fulfillment applications. So wrapping around the ERP, wrapping around Sage 300 to connect to your MRP, to connect to your CMS. That's how we get rid of that scope limitation. We go end to end and wrap everything together in one standardized process.
Is Edisoft an order portal where customers can enter orders?
No, that's a good question, and one that we have received before. This Merchant Cloud is not a portal to customize where your partners or vendors can enter order information. It is simply a platform for connecting to your B2B and B2C channels. So you have a web store in Shopify, you have trading partners in the world of EDI that want to send you orders. We connect to those, process those orders in a standardized way to start by posting them into Sage, validating that and everything else. So that process is standard in the Edisoft products, but we can connect to all of these B2B and B2C channels.
And the last question I have here is, what is the timeline to deliver a typical EDI and warehouse project?
Yeah, another great question. I mean, if we are talking about simplifying that challenge, we've done actually a deployment like this, connecting Merchant Cloud to Shopify and to EDI trading partners, as well as introducing warehouse barcode scanning devices with connections to a carrier management system. We've done that in about 12 to 16 weeks. So 3 to 4 months for this entire scope of services. Now, other portions of this go live at different times. We don't need 4 months for the entire thing to go live together, but it just shows you what could take just with a warehouse management system for our, the other applications that support warehouse management functionality. Those can be 12 to 24 month projects on their own because of the customized nature of their functionality, because of the customized integrations to Sage. Because of how we look at meshing, we actually have a view to standardized processes, and we allow you to configure changes to those as you need it. Right? So we can actually do this entire scope that you see on the screen right now, typically closer to 3 months, but I'll be conservative in saying 3 to 4. We have delivered this in 2 to 3 previously.
And that does look like that's all the questions that we have coming in for this session. So I'd just like to thank you, Alexander, for presenting today.
Thank you very much. It was a pleasure to be here, and I'm always proud to be a part of the BAASS Connect. So thank you, and thank you to the BAASS team, and thank you everyone for listening today.